Okay, so this should be fun. Because we are now going to review, well, on our way to Suffolk,
Yep.
the comic book, The Curse of Venus Aversa, by Dani Filth and Kurt Akma, sorry.
Akma. Or Akbar.
I'm going to show the cover, but in the interest of keeping this channel PG,
No, it's not. We swear all the
censor-
time. It's not exactly PG. It's just you can't have nudity on YouTube.
But that's the back cover.
Yeah. Did you cover the tits on the back
Yes,
cover? 'Cause-
there's no tits on the back
Yes,
cover.
there is.
Oh, it's a cartoon tit. Everyone can deal with a cartoon tit.
Ah,
It's one cartoon tit with no nipple.
okay.
I think we can live with that.
No. Yeah. I
Considering how
guess.
many times we said cunt on this channel, I really think.
Yeah, I know. It's just swearing is fine with. The second someone shows nudity, it's like, bam.
Yeah.
But
Vulgar language is fine and
A
offensive
tiny
comments
tit in
is
the
fine.
corner should be
But
fine.
boobs! Oh my god! No way! Anyway,
Yeah.
but it's a lovely cover. Anyone wants to
Just
Google
use your
it.
finger. Yeah.
I did! I've already shown it.
Oh, I didn't
have
even
shown
notice.
the cover. Yes, because obviously you're driving.
Yes.
I'm doing it. Right.
Okay.
Anyway. So it's sort of like.
An awful comic book.
You said I could introduce this.
I couldn't resist.
Essentially, it's a story revolving around this character called Daniel.
Cough.
And without going really in depth into the plot, it's not about Cradle of Filth and it's not about Dani, but it's sort of like a mixture of almost like. It has a lot of Cradle of Filth references in it.
Yeah.
Even the music, it's sort of almost like. I don't really know how to explain this. Like, almost like a fan service comic, and also like what I'd imagine, like sort of Dani's fantasy, and it's just kind of meanders its way through a lot of the subject matter in Cradle of Filth's music. For example, it mentions Bathory, Gabrielle's the main character, Maria is the main character, and it has some of like Dani Filth's idols in it. Oscar Wilde is in it.
Yeah.
It's very gothic. Like Dani Filth's a big fan of the Victorian period and gothic literature, so it's set in the Victorian time. It's almost like Dani, like in an alternative universe.
See, I would
so-
describe it as Dani Filth has written a fan fiction and a self-insert fan fiction about his own band.
Yeah, it's sort of like supposed to, it actually says somewhere in the foreword, which I couldn't find, that it's meant to be like almost sort of not a direct interpretation of Cradle of Filth's obviously journey or life, but it's meant to be kind of like a parable. It's meant to just capture the atmosphere and the gist
Yeah.
of it and sort of all the things that, like vampires and ghouls,
Lots of
ghosts
blatant
and
nudity.
everything. Yeah, nudity, just a comic that incorporates everything.
Yeah.
Cradle of Filth.
Oh.
A bunch of filth, essentially. Horror and filth.
Yeah.
And gothicness, lots of gothicness.
Lots of tits and vagina.
Yes, lots of tits and vagina.
No schlong.
Am I allowed to show the first page as an example?
Is it tits and vagina?
No, there's no tits and vagina, unfortunately.
Well, yes, of course you can.
Okay, so this is sort of just to get an idea of it,
I mean,
essentially
it might be
gothic
better. I might be able to scan it in.
Yeah,
So just instead of the page up,
yeah, we'll
try and scan it in. Still put it up, because if I can't, at least we have that as backup. And if I can, it'll just cover it, so it's fine.
Can I read the very, very short first page to give the readers the viewers a
Sure.
taste? Okay. So we have like this picture of a castle manor house. Ipswich, Suffolk, England, 1897. It is truly an interesting thing to be hated and to be scorned. But to be forgotten, dear reader, that is so much worse. Sorry, I'm all over the place.
Maybe you're not the best.
Yeah,
at
maybe I'm
reading,
not best. Maybe you should read it for yourself, the first page, it kind of gets most of it.
Give me 2 minutes. Right, continue on. We will give a quick dramatic reading of it in a sec.
Okay. Right, so we both read this comic, and I think it's fair to say I'm a very big Cradle of Filth fan.
Yes,
Where is your status on Cradle of Filth fandom?
they're okay.
There we go. And this is a comic that's clearly written for Cradle of Filth fans. I mean, others may enjoy it, and it does say that, people who are just interested
It's
in
a love letter to
horror,
fans.
yeah, who are interested in like horror and gothiness and a lot of similar things.
There's a lot of inside
But,
references.
yeah.
Yeah.
You're right, so it is for Cradle of Filth fans. And I think if you're not a Cradle of Filth fan, a lot of it is going to be lost or not.
Yep.
Yeah, so much appreciated. Is this a dramatic reading?
Yes, I will do the dramatic reading now, and you can kind of see the level of writing we are working with here. Okay? Imagine 15-year-old emo girl writing in a journal about how she thinks the world is full of faking conformists. Okay, so
Poe was a mopey ass guy.
yeah,
Who
but
now hid up in his bedroom.
again though, like
And I love Poe.
better written. So, Ipswich, Suffolk, England, 1897. It is truly an interesting thing to be hated and to be scorned, but to be forgotten, dear reader, that is so much worse. Few ever ask what becomes of the villain at the end of the story. He doesn't always die after all. Sometimes he is left, not only to his own devices, but to those that fate and cruel circumstances have bestowed upon him. And then, in a speech bubble, damn you all!
It's not a shouty line.
Yes, it is.
It's a damn you all.
Then,
It's a...
boobs! Straight away. Yeah.
Look what the fuck you've done! Oh my god! How folded that is! Ah, it's terrible! Ah! Another page like jumps out of me. I have to fix the spine now.
Sorry. You like my dramatic
Okay.
reading?
Ish.
Fuck you! What was wrong with it?
It's not how I imagined it in my head at all.
No.
You got it wrong. But fair enough. Better than mine. So I think first of all we're gonna talk about the story.
Yeah.
Then the writing.
Yeah.
Then
The art style.
And then
Overall opinion.
kind of a conclusion.
Yes.
Oh, with an introduction first.
Okay, so, broadly, the story is about how our main character, Daniel, because it couldn't be more obvious if we smack someone in the face with a board.
It's literally meant to be him.
But it's not, because,
It is meant to be him.
but he's in the book anyway, as himself.
Yeah, I know, but okay, you're messing it up now. It's supposed to be Daniel clearly.
Okay, so, I don't agree, but, so,
For all intents and purposes, okay, it's supposed to be Daniel, but like...
okay, would you like to give your summary of the story, because I cannot do it from a non-biased perspective.
Okay, right. And I can do it neutrally. Right, okay.
Well, no,
So,
but at least you actually
it's
say it.
about a character called Daniel, who is a lord who lives in a manor house, all kind of gothic and stuff.
Yes.
And this character, Daniel, is essentially, and later on it does kind of confirm it, it's like Daniel, as if you took kind of the essence of Dani Filth, and you could bottle it, and then you could put it into a person living in the Victorian era. So yes, it is a separate person, but it is supposed to be, like later on in the comic book, it says there will be others like you
Yeah.
that come later, and then you see actual Dani Filth as he looks today, right? So it's essentially meant to be almost him. So it's this like, he's a poet, he's a bit of an alcoholic, and he is in love with this girl called Gabrielle.
Yes.
And I've just got Cradle Of Filth music in my head, because that's part of the music, big character there. And who is tragically taken from him. And it starts off, you think she's been murdered, and
Yeah.
he can't get over it, so he's kind of like, just going a little bit nuts about it. He also has a friend, and it's like a bromance, he is friends with Oscar Wilde, which I love, so
And that's why I say it's Dani Filth's personal fan fiction.
I think he maybe gave Oscar Wilde.
I'm best
He
friends
did-
with Oscar
I
Wilde.
was really waiting for the Oscar Wilde sexy scene, it didn't happen unfortunately. Like,
Made
you know,
himself the chosen one and best friends with Oscar Wilde.
they are the legends. Anyway, so yeah, and he's lost the love of his life kind of thing. And meeting Oscar Wilde, then he sees Oscar Wilde go like to jail and stuff for, you know, being
Homosexuality.
gay, yeah.
Yeah.
And essentially revolving around Gabrielle's death, there is something about a mysterious book that's kind of occultish. In this, Dani is a writer, and he has
He writes.
his namesake is also on this occult book.
Yeah. Dani Filth in this book is basically the Stephanie Meyer of this universe. The woman who wrote, I believe it's the woman who wrote Twilight.
Oh, no, he's not.
He writes porn for women. That's literally what he does.
No, he doesn't. That's not what he writes.
Yes, it is.
No, it's not what he writes.
That's why when he's in the bar, a woman comes up to him and says like, I read your book, and if the Lord knew the things I did during. It's literally,
I don't even recall
he's writing
this.
50 Shades of Grey.
No, for fuck. Okay, would you just... That is not what's happening.
It is.
Anyway, can I please finish? You said I could explain it.
Yes,
I'm trying
I
to
know.
explain the book, and people are going to lose the plot here. Okay.
Yes, it's so twisting and winding and...
It is actually.
Okay, come on. Ow.
What was I saying? Anyway, sorry, yeah, so he's a writer, and and his writing, it's not namesake, it's like pen name or whatever.
Yeah.
His writing name has appeared on this occult
His
book,
pseudonym.
which was found, thank you, next to his dead wife, Gabrielle. I remember them,
No,
right?
the book is actually named.
Fuck,
Yes,
it's
they
not
were
a book.
married. The book is actually named after. The book held the same name on the cover as his pseudonym.
That's exactly what I just said.
So the way you said it made it sound like his name was written on the inside
right,
of the book. or
no,
something.
right, okay, fair enough.
The title of the book.
So, he hasn't even seen this book, that his name is on this occult-like book. But essentially when the police go in and investigate Gabrielle's death, it looks like a murder, and then they see this book which is full of all like occultish things. You know, they suspect Lord Daniel, and, you know, it looks like it's not going to go so well for him, that he can get in some deep shit here.
Yeah.
And as kind of a punishment and a dick move, they rip all of his literature, like from ban all
Yeah,
of his
they
literature.
confiscate it on the grounds of indecency.
Which is kind of like what happens in real life with a lot of Cradle of Filth artwork and music and stuff with the censorship.
It is a parable.
It is terrible. And so he just wants to get hold of this book, this occult book, because he has no idea, like, you know, my name's on it, I don't know why my name's on it, it's got something to do with Gabrielle's death, I don't know why she was reading it, all this kind of shit. And he manages to track down this book from an antique stealer.
Yeah. Well, he's a guy who
Stratus,
he's
isn't it?
officially an antique stealer, but what he actually does is he purchases confiscated evidence from the police and then trades it out. So things that were used in evidence for a case, but then at this point now are just kind of clogging up the evidence cupboard. So he purchases them and sells them on.
And then to keep it brief, essentially what happens then is, upon opening and I think reading this book, or owning this book, I can't even remember if he gets to read it in the real world, I think he does. He hears this bombastic music, and I think the music at one point is described.
It is Cradle of Filth music.
It's Cradle of Filth music, supposed to be Cradle of Filth music, but there's a great description of it, where he describes it, and I'll find it later, something like as if a harlot of angels and a chorus of demons were forced to play together.
Yeah.
That's how he describes what it sounds, which is, I think, a very appropriate description
Yeah,
of
it's
Cradle of Filth music.
orchestra and then rock mixed.
And, you know, the lovely female vocals that are very peaceful and...
Yes, I mean, they're part of the orchestra as well.
Yeah. And he's kind of transported to a parallel dimension where
Yes.
it's, again, very like gothy and stuff. And I like the way actually, at one point he comes across an old hag woman. He's been walking through these like woods in the dark and it's all stormy and shit. And he comes across an old woman
Yeah.
and he's trying to like get information out of her, like, where the fuck am I? Kind of thing. And he kind of like knocks her and she's carrying something on her back and she's carrying a cradle.
Yeah.
That made me laugh. And she sort of like is being all aloof and it's like, you know, you're supposed to head this way. And there's this castle. And he goes into the castle. I think it's a castle. And essentially it's just a bunch of, you know, like 90s goth girls.
Welcome to the
corsets,
orgy!
latex. Yeah, he says, like, 'cause obviously he's from the Victorian times,
Yeah.
and they are dressed in a way that he's never seen before. And they are dressed in a modern goth
Yeah.
kind of way. And it's, yeah, like this big party. And everyone's like, oh, Daniel, I've been waiting for you.
There's like
And stuff.
naked women like just strapped on the wall, who are there for nothing than to be naked women strapped on a wall. All of that.
Oh, yeah. Oh shit, we've got something important. The antique stealer, Stratus, has a daughter,
And his
Maria.
name's Strauss, by the way.
Sorry. Has a daughter, Maria, who's also in Cradle of Filth music, and she's dead. And when Dani Filth in
She went
this,
missing.
she went missing, presumed dead then.
Yeah, there's the body though.
And yeah, nobody. And Dani Filth finds her also in this party,
Yeah.
scantily dressed gothic ladies and stuff. And so she's in this parallel world.
Yeah.
And then it sort of erupts, basically. It turns out they're all vampires. And all of a sudden they just start devouring guests left,
Yeah.
right, and centre. They basically just like massacre everybody
All the naked
except
women.
Dani.
Yeah.
And then they all turn into bats and fly away.
Yeah.
For a bit.
That's the worst part of vampire lore for me, the turning into a bat thing. 'Cause it's just the most goofy part of the entire thing for me. Like, you know when you see monstrous vampires where they resemble bat-like creatures, a mix between man
Yeah.
and bat. I'm okay with that, but turning into a tiny fucking bat is just stupid. Sorry, my own personal
And
gripe with vampire lore.
Bedford. And then he's sort of like walking down these like old gothic halls, and there's all pictures on the walls of like Elizabeth Bathory and Gilles de Rais and I can't think now, but all the kind of figures in Cradle of house music. And then he sees the ghost of Gabrielle, and he sees her ghost in the fog.
I sigh.
And yeah, her ghost, throughout this whole thing, her ghost just keeps appearing and like running as ghosts do and disappearing.
Yeah,
and he's
basically
chasing
being a tease.
Yeah, and he's chasing after this ghost. And then I think he finds out, doesn't he? And then I think that's when he finds out he walks into a room and he sees Gabrielle dead.
Oh, right.
As she was in the real world, because in the real world, Gabrielle was found with a razor slit across her throat and this book next to her, but Dani doesn't actually see that. The police tell him what it looked like, and in this parallel world, he sees the scene, he sees Gabrielle
like a
like that,
recreation.
and he discovers that it wasn't a murder at all, because he's obviously been looking for a murderer. It was a suicide.
Yeah.
She killed herself, so obviously that's a bit upsetting, so he's not too happy with that. And he's all distraught and stuff, and then the room disappears again, and then her ghost's running around again, he's chasing her, and he essentially comes across a statue then of Lilith,
Yes.
first wife of Adam in Jewish mythology. And it turns out that essentially this whole world that he's in belongs to Lilith.
Yeah.
And it's all about Lilith basically trying to collect all the intellectual minds, all the poets, all the kind of like Oscar Wildes, the poets of the world, to add a verse to her book, this like occult book.
Yeah.
And
Say the name of the book.
basically, I can't.
The Gospel of Filth.
Oh right, yeah, the
Written in
Gospel of Filth. The Gospel of Filth, yeah. And you sort of, I guess, upon like adding your verse, you kind of like sell your soul to Lilith.
Yeah.
In a way, and yeah, you can like join her army and stuff. And so that's what Dani Filth ends up doing in this.
I mean, one of my biggest issues with a lot of this, honestly, not just with the comic book, but with this kind of imagery and stuff itself, is that by its very nature, it describes things like sexual liberation, bondage, enjoying things that are traditionally considered spooky, homosexuality, all these different things. It describes as being evil, but the thing of like, it's cool to give into your dark side, but it's still described as evil. Like, there is a good and evil, and you're just looking at the perspective of people who they enjoy being on the evil side of it, like that's where they like to be. But it is still categorizing those things as being wrong within a Christian mythology as well. And obviously, I don't agree with Christian morality at all. So a lot of the things they do, like, which are meant to be wrong, like even, I gotta be honest, even like drug taking, I don't think are innately wrong or evil in any way. And I think it sends a bad message. It shouldn't be like, people should be allowed to give into their darker selves. It should be, this side of us isn't our darker selves, it's just a part of us. There's nothing right or wrong about it, it's just part of us. It's the end of it.
But when, I get that, that's a valid point, but in this, like, when Oscar Wilde is imprisoned for
Just being
homosexuality, Dani Filth basically says, like, here's a man of great intelligence and intellect, far superior to, people, and they're just, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And these short-sighted people are just chucking him away, and then here it says, for 3 bloody years, my friend, a lover of all life's finer things and a gentleman of the finest order, rotted like a common criminal reduced to hard labour. It's essentially, he is describing the people of that time as being stupid and short-sighted, like, there is nothing wrong with Oscar Wilde's sexuality. Oscar Wilde is the one who is, like, above them.
Yeah.
So he is not saying, like,
but it's still,
like,
it is still tied into the darker side of, like, human nature and, like, Lilith and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, when it comes to Oscar, his homosexuality is not him giving into his devilish and deviant ways.
Right.
He is described as, like, a lovely gentleman and a poet and a beautiful man.
Yeah.
Not like...
That's fair enough.
The world would not accept his occasional indulgence in, it's not anything like that. So it's not categorizing the gay in the dark.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean. If we're doing dark light.
No, that's fair
The gay
enough.
is actually in the light in this, and the people who are persecuting homosexuality are the fucking idiots.
Yeah.
In this, and the cunts. It actually refers to their religious views in this as cuntish.
Yeah.
But I do, the general gist of what you're saying, I do get. I know that you don't like the evil and dark.
Yeah, I don't believe in black and white.
Because, and just to wrap up the plot.
Yeah.
Dani Filth briefly returns to the real world, obviously without Gabrielle, because she's stuck in this other world, and decides, fuck it, I am going to sign my soul over to Lilith. That's where Gabrielle really is. He goes mad, digs up Gabrielle's grave, and her body's not there, and it's like, it's because she is with Lilith. And, and it basically hints that Lilith's going to take her revenge, because, what do you call it? I won't read it all, but, it basically, oh yeah, she watches and she waits. All that we love and hold dear will kneel on Persian before her. Okay, I cannot, basically, that she's going to bring an inferno, and it's all going to, get destroyed. And he says, in all my life, I've but barely believed in a god, but if there is one, may he help his empire and all the world, which freaked me out a bit. And then Dani says, because I'm going to help her. I like that. I was like, yay, go rebel Dani, but that is very black and white. He decided to join the dark side for some selfish reasons. And then he basically kills himself too and joins Lilith. And that's sort of where he's at, just kicking around.
Again, like, I've read through it, you've read through it. I still don't think it's very well written. I think it's got a lot of very blatant cliches, and the imagery, every now and again it'll use imagery that's quite good and quite clever and actually effective, but then it'll ruin it by, because like most of it's written, they attempt to write it almost like Poe for a lot of it, and I gotta be honest, for a lot of it they're just not up to snuff. Writing that kind of, whoever penned it and got it down just wasn't up to snuff to write that level of writing, but they did a good attempt, and in places it really works. But then there's suddenly this jarring, every now and again there's this full-on jarring change, where, like, there's one scene where he's been running from these vampires as they chase him to this crypt, and he realises they're not actually trying to capture him, they're trying to herd him to it. And it's all written quite well. And then all of a sudden you just see this frame of him turning around, holding up both middle fingers, saying "fuck you," and then shutting the door, and it's just so jarring. It's weird, and that kind of stuff happens a lot in this comic book, where he just starts swearing in a way that just isn't eloquent. It's just like, cunt and fuck and shit, and that's that's fine, but it's completely diametrically opposed to the tone they've already set, and I really struggle with that. It's like tonal whiplash.
Okay. No, I agree with you there with tonal whiplash, definitely, and I think what's happened, I made two comments. First of all, I think there are parts of this comic which are beautifully written.
Okay.
I don't know how much
the best
of it
parts that are written is when they're directly quoting Dani Filth's music.
No, it's not even that. That's actually a different point. So I don't know exactly who wrote what. But I think a fair bit of the actual writing here is Dani. And I think a lot of it, he's trying to write in, like a Poe-like style.
Yeah.
And I think one of the difficulties is Dani Filth is a very brilliant writer.
Okay.
He is a great poet. He can write beautifully his lyrics, right?
Yeah.
Can we agree on that?
Yeah, I'll give you that.
But Dani Filth is used to writing songs that last 8-9 minutes, right? And when he paints a picture, it's, if you take any of his songs, I'll take Ghost in the Fog, because everyone knows that,
But I think that's
it's like a rambling verse, it's a long,
studied
winded thing.
Trained and has learned and has amazing amounts of experience writing music and writing words for music, whereas writing a comic book, most people consider to be something that's piss easy, and it's not. It's really difficult. It's a hard thing to do, and I don't think he went in with it with the idea that this was going to be piss easy.
Yeah.
But I don't think he fully realised the challenge of what he was attempting to do.
Well,
is the point.
I think it's just essentially, this is someone who's not a comic book writer. This is the first comic book, fan-funded, essentially for fans.
Yeah.
And it's a bit like if you ask somebody, like you said, he writes music and poetry, and it's kind of one and the same almost, because I write poems and someone's like song lyrics and vice versa.
Yeah.
But his writing style that he's built upon over the years is very different, and it's a bit like taking some of Poe's work, and turning around to Edgar Allan Poe and going, that beautiful 12-page poem that you wrote.
Yeah.
you've got these snippets of like really good imagery where he's described something painted. Whether if you don't like the kind of scene that he's painting, if it's not, you know, you're not into Victorian Gothic horror, then you're not going to like it anyway.
Yeah.
But
I want to.
the issue is he's written in little snippets, and he's not used to writing in snippets.
I want to give an example of it. I'll find somewhere to stop so I can read an example of it. So continue.
And then, so I do see that as a bit of an issue. Yeah, I will agree with you there. So sometimes it's a bit like it's just missed the mark, if you know what I mean. And I think the other critique I would do is I really like the way he's incorporated a lot of Cradle of Filth lyrics, song titles. But I think again he's had to take what he's used to writing, which is really big pieces, condense them into small pieces and link together, and then he has to insert song lyrics, and it's very kind of having to cut and paste.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean. So it's great as a Cradle of Filth fan. If you really like Cradle of Filth music, it's like because you know I got really excited because like I know the song and it's exciting to read. If you take that out of it though, that bias to enjoying seeing the lyrics there, yes, I can see how sometimes it's like that doesn't flow from that box to that box. And then also on your geometrically opposed argument, I think because it's meant to sum up Cradle of Filth's music and Dani Filth almost, you have the one side, I mean, if you kind of look at the more orchestral stuff and like Swan Song for a Raven, which is all like beautiful, and you know, his kind of love for Victorian romantic Gothic horror, but then you've got songs like Gilded Cunt, and you've got Dani's like middle finger to church and authority. You have to get that in there too, and essentially those are two different things. And it works really well in his music because he has like, if it's a song, because he has songs that include both the beautiful, very romanticized Gothic poetic nature of in his lyrics, and then he's managed to get fuck and cunt and all this stuff in. But it's good because it's a song, it's sort of flowing like that. Or, you know, you got different albums like Damnation in a Day, very big bombastic orchestral, and then you got From the Cradle to Enslave, which is a lot more like angry and screaming and words like cunt and fuck. And so he's, you know, the albums themselves are sometimes tonally split, or the songs are tonally split, or they've worked in, you know, through a slow musical progression. But in a comic book, you cannot do that. And or it's very difficult to do that. And so
it kind of comes across as like, say, okay, I wandered down the dark and stormy alley, steam rolling across the cobblestones, the police chasing after me, billy clubs in hand, revolvers at their side. They are determined to catch their quarry and prey, and I am determined to outrun my hunters. As I continue down the dark and stormy alley, I take a corner and suddenly am exposed to a sudden and abrupt dead end. My options are limited, my resources nil. The police catch up behind me, and they spake thusly to me. They say, hands on your head, on the ground. And just before I do so, I pull out my two middle fingers and say, fuck you! Tonal shift.
Yeah, I think, okay, so I'll give an example of the kind of gothy romantic stuff. Where he's talking about Gabrielle, the love of his life. I'm not going to read it all, obviously. And her vintage poured, and my cup rathened over. Our bed was my table, and my feast wanted for nothing. Okay, I didn't read that very well.
No.
I really can't read. Okay, you're going to have to do all the reading.
You're not one for dramatic reading.
No, I can't read it full stop. I'm like, I keep...
Reading out loud, though, is, you know...
Yeah, I can't read it out loud.
Anyway.
But, yeah, so I can see that, and I think that's why it makes a really big difference if you, like, you know, really like... If you're a big Cradle of Filth fan, I think that even though sometimes it feels very jarring, you're so excited by what's being inserted there, that it doesn't register as a jar. It's like more of an excitement, it's more of a squeal, it's more of like, oh my god, yay! So, but I can see if you're not this big Cradle of Filth fan, you're just kind of reading it as like, oh, Cradle of Filth are okay, and you're reading it from I want to read a good comic book perspective, that you look at that and be like, perfect. So yeah, I mean, I think Dani is a very good writer. I think some of this is very well written. I think he's done a very good job at getting the gothy side, the Cradle of Filth sort of fuck you side, and all the references and people in there. He's really managed to fit a lot in, but in fitting so much in and doing so many different styles
Yeah.
Because that's what he's giving us, which is what, means that I want that. And not being a comic book writer, I mean, it shows.
Yeah.
It does show.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I expected that, to be honest. That's the thing. I went into this expecting... Like, it's a bit like Cradle of Fear. I love that movie. And it's a great B movie, because that's what B movies are like. There's no criticism on it, like, it's about, like, that's the kind of B movie. But if you're going into it like, I want to see a B movie, and knowing what a B movie is, and I want to see a Cradle of Filth movie, you get an epic Cradle of Filth B movie. So it's the same with this comic.
Yeah.
It's clearly trying to give fans some fan fiction,
I'll give it that.
It does it, but essentially it's a hard job, and he's not a comic book writer.
Yeah.
I mean, it is written with somebody who does have comic book experience.
Really?
But again, second writer. But again, normally you just pick, we're going to go for a Victorian romance novel. Or we're going to go with, a vampire story. Or we're going to go with a ghost story. And he's gone, I want to go with all of this.
Yeah.
I want to go with all of it now. And it can't be that big. And it needs to have this, that. There's so many criteria that he had to meet. But, yeah, so we will take a break now, and then we will do...
Yeah, 2 seconds. There's a part in here which I thought was very fan-fiction-y for him. Okay? So, get ready for this. Okay.
I'm excited.
Gabriella, please, just listen. Will you marry me? Oh, Daniel, of course I will. But what will all your very rich friends think?
Okay, you pick one of the word parts.
I don't care what anyone says. And I care even less for what they think. If we're to be united in scandal, at least they'll remember us.
Can you please read the smutty part for me? Can you please read from there to there?
Yep.
I assume it's probably the best place.
She used to warn me, though. She talked. We would talk. Wow, that's really bad. That's a really bad line. Into the night, and through the morning and beyond. And we would dance and whisper promises of all that might follow. But I crave so much more than her conversation.
The way you're saying it is not right.
And she gave enthusiastically. My bountiful wine press, my Gabriella. The finest quality of love is that she never runs out. Her vintage poured, and my cup runneth over. Our bed was my table, and my feast wanted for nothing.
You said the word wrong.
No, I didn't.
You said the finest quality of love. It's of lover. If you're going to quote Dani, you're going to do it goddamn right!
It was badly written. It's a badly written comic. Oh, boobs!
I will leave you to your boobs.
Right there. But what sort of temple have I discovered was another question entirely. Gabriella's shade was nowhere to be seen. Admittedly, though, my new surroundings provided ample distraction. It occurred to me, though,
there is no
that the vampires sought to drive me here from behind. Oh, matron! That her ghost wanted only to leave me from the front. At that moment, I understood that I might not see her again, her purpose fulfilled.
Okay, you seriously, the way you said behind, front, and fulfilled, you made that sound like a sexual thing. Honestly, you did, and it's literally vampires putting him from his behind. The ghost leading, chasing the ghost. You made it dirty. That was not dirty. There was nothing that was supposed to be dirty about that, and you've made it. But you've actually taken a direct quote from Dani Filth, and you have made it more filthy than he did. Well done. I hope you're proud of yourself. So it's be a non-biased review, so you have to read some of the stuff that I like, not, just the stuff that you want to take the piss out of.
Okay, so this is kind of describing Lord Daniel and Oscar Wilde's relationship. And please, in this, note the gay undertones, and also Dani putting himself on the level of Oscar Wilde. So, Oscar Wilde. What a mad, glorious bastard, and better friend, critic, and drinking partner I'd never known. I remember those endless nights, assaulting each other's work.
The work, yeah.
Yes, dissecting so many specimens, both romantic and practical. In the words of Oscar Wilde, words, mere words, how terrible they were, how clever and vivid and cruel. One could not escape from them, and yet what a subtle magic there was in them. in that work was genius. We said it. If it was terrible, we said it louder. And when our passions erupted riotously and wetly into the streets outside, we shared them just the same. But when the gentleman of the jury understood the company he preferred, the less fair sex, and devotees of the love that dared not speak its name, he went to prison. For 3 bloody years, my friend, a lover of all life's finer things, and a gentleman of the first order, rotted like a common criminal, reduced to hard labour. I thought that line could be twisted provocatively. With my own ordeal on the horizon, it made me question the wisdom of the law, art, nature, and God himself. If I'd ever even believed Jesus is a cunt. You see what I mean by tonal shift? I would sometimes whisper to myself when thinking of Oscar. I nearly wrote it on a sign to carry outside the courthouse during his trial, but didn't because I'm a coward, really. I'm sorry, that line is kind of the thing of like, well, I would have overthrown the government, but I had other affairs in order.
He had a murderer to catch at the time.
No, he didn't.
Well, he thought he
This
did.
is beforehand.
That's not.
Yeah, it is.
Fuck.
It was over 3 years ago. That's why Oscar
Okay,
hasn't
yeah.
heard about what happened until he gets there.
With you, okay. I just like the way,
Well,
I like the
basically,
romance,
he's
and
a
I like the way
Howard.
that even though the picture, when it talks about their passions erupting wetly and riotously and spilling into the streets and whatever, even though it's depicting a fight in the picture,
Yeah.
in my mind,
Yeah, that's called you having a sexual fantasy, babe.
I think he knew what I wanted to read.
Wow! He's like a 40-year-old balding man.
I know, but like, okay, if you imagine Stephen Fry and Oscar Wilde,
Well, that's just amazingly sexy.
there you go, right?
That's
So
good.
if you add, I'd like to add, okay, let's not go there,
What
but-
were you gonna say?
And now I'm just adding people to orgies randomly. There's an accessory school.
Just press OK.
Okay.
It's fine, it's not recording.
Okay, so I think I give an obvious on the writing.
Mm-hmm.
As a fan, I like it. I see
As
some of your
not
points.
a fan, it's bad.
You have no positive highlights? Just
I
not?
said that. I said that there's parts of it that are well written, but they are very much overshadowed by a lot of the bad writing.
Okay, and as a fan, even though I think there's some bits that are a bit jarred,
And I think the tone, because of the type of writing they're trying to do, I think that the tone can be lost. Like, you know when I was on about the scene when he goes into the... When he goes into the crypt, right?
Vampires, yeah.
Yeah. That's kind of what I mean though, when it's difficult to write in that style without basically creating accidental innuendo.
Yeah, anyway, we're doing our one sentence wrap up here.
Yeah, I'm
Okay,
done.
so I would say, even though I agree with some of your points where things don't quite fit together, as a fan, because often some of the stuff that's shoved in is there because fans want it there, if you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I get excited and kind of, my brain therefore just overloads.
Yeah.
Fact. So yeah, so that's the plot and the writing, the art style.
Oh god, the art style. It's bad. I think if I sat down and had the time, I could draw better, and I don't draw.
No, I'm sorry. Being a dick.
I think it needed a lot more time and a lot more effort put into it. It starts out, this is the weird thing though, right? The art style starts out pretty good at the beginning, you know? Not anything to write home about, but it's decent enough, and it's serviceable.
A lot of nice gothic imagery in the beginning, yeah.
Yeah.
It's not very
As the book goes on, it's almost like the artist got bored, and like, instead of putting detail in everything, he just kind of details the things that he found interesting, like the gore and the tits and the vagina. And there's a really good example of it near the end, when the main character has a revolver and is off to kill this guy called Strauss. And the revolver is the most just batshit stupid thing I've ever seen in my life. Like, the fucking artist had never seen a gun before. Ever. It's weird. And then literally on the next page is this really well drawn, gory as fuck scene And you can tell it's just where he wasn't really interested in this. He was a lot more interested in this. Because you can tell how much time he put in one to the other. And there should be a standard. It shouldn't be such a, up-down scale of quality. It should stick to a standard, and it doesn't. Can you show the gun?
Well, I thought it's best if we just insert pictures later because it's going to be all wobbly anyway. And I want to show some of the examples. Because I'm on that page, and the gun is drawn really badly, and the next page is a really well-drawn, grizzly scene, and there's a light coming from a lantern. It's really pretty. I do agree, I like the gothic imagery, so I think that's also a bias because I like gothic imagery a lot.
Yeah.
There's a lot of really beautifully drawn gothic imagery in here. But I do see your point. There are certain parts of it which are just not up to scratch with the rest,
Yeah.
I do agree with that. I think we're pretty. But, what am I trying to say? I think that's evident in a lot of comics. That's not to say, I don't want to, lower the standard because you should keep to your standard all the way through.
Yeah.
I just mean, considering this is not, produced, this is Dani getting in contact with some friends of his that he knows and things like that. And I think for an amateur comic, it's done very, very well. I've seen, proper comics that do this when they're being funded by, DC.
The problem is, so, today...
I don't want to lower the bar, but...
today, though, I'm not sure when that comic book was made, right? But...
Very recently.
Oh, God, that doesn't help. Because you can go on, DeviantArt and find people who do better art than this, and as a hobby, and they make their own webcomics that are awfully written, don't get me wrong, but, they're not... They are well drawn, and they use colour and it looks nice. It may be about how...
I don't think it should be in colour.
It may be about how, Brony fan number 963 became the king of, the pony realm and married Rainbow Sparkle, and they had lots of, fucked up, deformed, part horse, part man babies that fart sparkles and rainbows, but it's well drawn, I mean, your sister could draw better, and more consistently. Your sister's really good. She's a child. Okay. I think that's fair.
No, I think there is a fluctuating standard in it. I think you're just judging and a bit harshly there.
Yeah, but I do that with everything.
Yeah, I know. That's why I'm not really saying anything about it too. It's a critic. But overall, I very much enjoy it.
I gotta be honest, I'm glad I read it. Because at the very least, I've got stuff for the wank bank.
Oh, so you also like to wanker with Dani Filth and Oscar Wilde?
Yeah, of course.
Who doesn't?
I'm glad I read it. It was funny. I enjoyed it. Just I found it funny. I didn't really...
In fact, oh my god, sorry, talking of tonal shifts and funniness, there is a part in there when all this serious shit's happening, which I find hilarious, and he wakes up, I think it's when he goes again from, somebody pours a bucket of water over his head to wake him up.
Oscar Wilde chucks a bucket of water on him.
Yeah. And he said,
I remember that.
I woke up, basically startled or suddenly and wet, but not for the first time. It's that is what I think it is, yeah?
Yeah, basically that.
A bit of jizz joking. Again, really inappropriate tonal shift.
Yeah.
But considering it's supposed to incorporate Dani Filth's personality and Cradle Of Filth and all this kind of stuff, it needed to have something like that in it, and it got it in there. It may have just been totally out of nowhere, but it was in there.
It was
the jizz jokes.
Carry on levels of humour, or Austin Powers levels of humour.
Always fun. So yeah.
I think that's good enough.
Yep.